Welcome to the Burial Plot Horror Podcast with Brenda Tolian and Joy Yaley.
Welcome to Burial Plot, where we dig deep into all things writerly and spooky. I'm Joy Yaley, and I'm joined by my co-host, Brenda Tolian. Today, we have conjured up fellow horror author Michael Picco. It's rumored that he is a nice guy who only writes about very bad things. Things with sharp teeth and voracious appetites. Things that lie in wait in dark shadows. Things that chitter and howl and scream and slither. Michael is an award winning short story writer, poet, and essayist, novelist, and occasional columnist living in the Colorado High Country. Michael received his BA in English from Western State University in Colorado, but his fascination with the genre started when he read The Outsider by H.P. Lovecraft in third grade. Since receiving his degree, he has contributed to a number of well reviewed anthologies and has written an award winning collection of short stories titled Scenes from the Carnival Lounge, a collection of odd tales. Michael released his second collection, Corpse Honey, a Banquet of Gruesome Tales. His latest publishing credit, The Wheel, can be found in The Murder and Machinery Tales of Technological Terror and Mechanical Madness, released in 2021. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you on the Burial Plot.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Uh, Michael, one of the things I was looking over some of your work, and one of the things that I was kind of curious about is how do you categorize your style of horror? Some people will say that they're a biological horror writer or they're an occult horror writer. What do you consider yourself to be?
I'm not the kind of guy who writes about sparkly vampires or hunky werewolves or, any of the gonzo horror that you see out there, kind of the bizarro bent of horror. So no slasher type stuff. That's, as a reader and as a consumer of horror, those things have never really appealed to me. And as you might expect, if I was exposed to H.P. Lovecraft way back, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I kind of developed a taste for kind of the strange or odd tale, more of the weird tale variety of horror. So your viewers might know some of the stuff like Twilight Zone or Black Mirror or Tales from the Loop, stuff like that. That's the vein I tend to write in. It's a lot more psychological.
That's some of my favorite kind of horror. Black Mirror is one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, mine too.
That kind of horror that's kind of strange and twisted and kind of makes you sit back and think a little bit, kind of gives you a moment. That's some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah, I like to say that my stories get in your head. Get in your head and they kind of lay eggs there. So that's what I'm aiming for, is stuff that sticks with you long after you read it.
That's awesome. How did you come about? Like, a lot of people have different reasons why they work in the horror genre. What drew you into working in the horror genre?
Well, I talk a little bit about this in my introduction to Corpse Hunting, my latest collection. I've always kind of had that creepy kind of vibe going through my head. Even as a little kid, I just used to have the most vivid nightmares, and rather than struggle against that, the pull of that, I kind of turned around and embraced it, and I find that it agrees with me. I write better horror than I do like romance or fantasy, which I'm dying to write a fantasy novel, but I don't know if I really have the chops for it. I'm much more bent towards writing things that scare people than that have that fantasy bent to them.
Is there like something in particular, like for me, horror has a kind of power behind it that is like a commentary on society or where you are in your life, or the culture you might be a part of, or just like the last 4 or 5 years have been just awesome for horror writers, because it's a gift that keeps on giving out there with the pandemic and Trump and all these kinds of things, politics in general. So does your horror, do you take a similar approach to it, or like what are your thoughts on that, like the purpose of horror, I guess?
Well, I read an interesting quote by Alan Baxter about that, that really, I thought, knocked it out of the park. And I'm just going to read that. He says, I think horror is more honest. But it's not simply that it's horrible, it's necessary. We don't live in a world with happy endings. Everybody dies, everything breaks, all things end. Entropy is the only certainty. I want the honesty of horror's totality. Horror is the genre of honesty. And, that really hit it on the head for me. You couple that with what Lovecraft said about fear being mankind's oldest, most fundamental emotion. And that's paraphrasing. I think that, even while we were gathered around the campfire, wearing, animal skins and out hunting, I think there was a certain aspect of horror to the tales that we told. Poor Grog, my fellow caveman, got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, and the tiger bit his arm off, and all this. There's elements of horror that are fundamental to storytelling itself.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. It's like the cautionary tale, the warning.
Yes.
And that deep-seated fear of the dark.
Yes.
What's beyond in the darkness, and what's beyond in death.
Well, it's our reptilian brain, right?
Yeah,
it's
for
that
sure.
part of our brain that's so deeply rooted in our physiology that it still drives a lot of our decisions. I would argue that fear is more motivating than 9/10 of the rest of the emotions. You can motivate, as we've seen with politics to a great extent on the right. We've seen them motivate by fear more adeptly than motivating by policy or by conscious governing.
Yeah, and I guess the other side of the aisle would argue that was happening, that the Republicans would argue that the Democrats are doing the same.
Yes,
It's just,
absolutely.
it's kind of like when I think about the headlines that I read every morning, they're always like it's always such fear and doom and gloom. And, you ask yourself, why are they only reporting on that? Well, because that's what we want to read.
Yeah.
If we're honest with ourselves. Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
If it bleeds, it leads. And I think that's true in this genre too. There's something fundamental about horror that I think the rest of the genres kind of struggle to achieve or never quite reach, that horror achieves regularly. And there's a humanity to it that is missing in a lot of other genres of writing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like in horror, I have a certain amount of freedom to say things that I might not be able to say in other genres and have it be accepted.
Yes.
So along those lines, Mike, what kinds of things inspire your stories?
Oh,
yes, do tell. I've read a couple. Where does that come from, man?
It sounds corny. It sounds very corny, but I find inspiration everywhere. I am a chronic nature documentary junkie, right? So I love, the David Attenborough BBC, this planet kind of documentaries where they, follow an insect around for like 12 months and try to recreate its life as best they can. I love that kind of thing. It's fascinating. One of the stories I wrote is about the cordyceps fungus, which is called the zombie ant fungus, and it's this horrifying way for an ant to die, for an ant to perish, and it's found in the tropical jungles of Thailand, right? And the little ant will be going along doing its thing, and it'll get infected with the spores from this fungus. And the spores actually have an enzyme that will eat through the ant's carapace, his exoskeleton. It'll eat through that, and then in 2 days' time, it will cause the ant to like ascend out of its usual zone of travel. It'll go up on a leaf or someplace where the conditions are ideal for this fungal growth, and it will latch onto the underside of a leaf or a stem of a leaf, and it'll die. And then this thing sprouts out of the back of its head, and it's just like this huge horn that has this bulbous crown on it. And that crown is the spores, the bulb, I guess you'd call it. And that bursts, and of course it rains down spores on all the ants below it. So, I mean, it's a horrifying way to die. This fungus actually controls the ant because the ant does things that it wouldn't normally do prior to its death. And of course, the fungus takes over the ant's entire body and, just basically hollows it out until all that's left is this, shell filled with these spores. And the horrifying thing about this particular fungus is that there's a variety of species of cordyceps that infects all different kinds of insects. There's one for beetles, there's one for ants, and it does effectively, it works the same way on all these creatures. So, I found that a particularly horrifying prospect and a great trope. And so I wanted to, employ it in one of my stories because I thought, man, that's yeesh. That's awful.
That's horrible.
Yeah. So, I mean, Mother Nature is so inventive. I talk a little bit about, we're from the Southwest, and some of your viewers might not know about the tarantula wasp. And this is a wasp that targets tarantulas, and it stings them and it paralyzes them, and then it drags them back to this burrow, and it lays an egg on their abdomen, and it closes up the burrow and flies away. But in the burrow, the tarantula is still alive. He's just paralyzed, and this egg, it will actually eat around all the vital organs of the tarantula, and keeping the tarantula alive while it eats it alive. And then the tarantula can't do anything; it's paralyzed until it's fed enough, and then it erupts out of the tarantula, a full-grown wasp. So
That's
I mean,
horrible.
there's no end to the horror of nature. So I find a lot of inspiration there.
That's the one thing in this world that I am terrified of is spiders. So to hear that the tarantula is tormented actually should bring me great pleasure, but it does not. That's just a horrifying thing. But I thought you were going to talk about the great tarantula migration that happens in southern Colorado every year, where they all scurry across the road to find a wife.
That's great to see, and if any of your viewers get a chance to see that in person, it is amazing.
No.
In the fall? Is it in the fall?
Is it the fall? I don't know when the heck it is because I'm not going.
I think I would enjoy that. I actually have the same fascination with the I can't even say the word, with the spores and all of those kinds of things. Actually, the tarantula wasp inspired a story for me too, but I think secretly you might be like my brother or something. I'll have to figure that out. Just, when I read your work, I'm like, oh, this guy's as demented as I am. We even post similar memes. Like, there's something wrong with us, man.
Well, that's a high compliment. I appreciate that. Hmm.
So
You
here is
know, I find some inspiration, and this is kind of hard to admit to, because you know I am a dyed in the wool atheist, and I find a lot of inspiration in like biblical stuff. Um, you know, my latest collection, Corpse Honey, is taken from um, Judges, the book of Judges, and it talks about Samson's on the road to Timea, I think, and he encounters the lion, and there's bees in the corpse of the lion, and they're making honey. It's corpse honey, right? So you know, I found that whole concept just delightfully macabre and just so weird. And you know, this is something that's been known about for 2,000 years, but they only recently, like within the last, I don't know, 75, 100 years, identified this type of bee. It's called a vulture bee, and it actually makes honey from the decaying meat of other animals that it finds.
oh, that really takes something out of honey, doesn't it?
So
Wow.
yummy.
Wow. I'm rethinking that teaspoon of honey in my coffee in the morning. I don't know. Yeah, you guys.
Well, you know, the honey that they produce is identical in every way to the honey that we consume, only that it's made from, you know, rotten meat, of course, but it doesn't decay. It involves the same kind of process. You know, they kind of barf it up in the hive, and their enzymes kind of produce this kind of thick, red, gooey, nasty honey, corpse honey.
Wow.
Yeah,
Who knew?
right.
Michael.
Right. Well, you know, horror writers are such, or horror readers are such jaded people. You know, we've seen everything. We've, you know, watched every axe murder, kill people. We've witnessed hundreds of deaths by the time, you know, we're adults. So I mean, you really have to kind of ratchet up the weird factor to get I think a modern reader's attention.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. It also came out that we are also better adjusted for the pandemic as it went forward, because we're used to dealing with crazy things.
Well, they talk about I've read studies, and you know, not to stray too far into politics again, but I've read studies where the part of your brain that is excitable and responds to threats is larger in some political groups than in other political groups. And I wonder sometimes if, you know, if we were to sever the heads and examine the brains of a lot of horror writers, if we would find that that part of the brain is smaller in us. And that's why, you know, we don't get so freaked out about the things that we read and the things that we write about, because we just don't have the capacity to do it.
You know, I was just reading Writing in the Dark by Tim Wagner, and he has a chapter in there where he publishes a actual letter that a woman wrote after reading one of his books, and she wrote it to his local police department, that he obviously had to be some kind of deranged, horrible, evil killer, and perhaps they should look into him. Well, the police forwarded this letter to the community college where he was a professor, and the letter eventually made its way to him, and he was like, I, you know, wore it as a badge of honor. And I just think that's really interesting that, you know, he said that it wasn't a problem with his college because they could differentiate between the art and the artist. And I think that sometimes, I remember when my next door neighbor found out what I do, she was totally shocked, and she's like, you can't be a horror writer, you listen to NPR. I don't know what the two have to do with each other, but yeah, but I think our brains just work a little differently than other people.
Well, and I think it demonstrates, maybe a lack of education, to put it charitably, where people will paint the artist and their work with the same brush. They're two entirely separate things. I think there's some crossover, of course, and there's a lot of me in my work, but the last thing that I'm going to do is go out and try to inject a fungus into somebody's skull, to see if I can control them. So
I'd have to, yeah. Well, and I was thinking about that too, because people are like, oh, maybe da 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 and stuff when they read my work, and it's like, I don't know how to deal with some other things that have happened in life, so the easiest way to do it is to put it symbolically into a story. It's also the way that I can take monsters that I've met or encountered in my life and kind of get inside their head to see what the motivation was to be, so monstrous. It's also just like, it's entertaining, and it's also, for me, it chills me out. It didn't used to catch me about 10 years ago, and I had no interest other than Kafka really diving into horror.
Really?
Yeah, no, I wasn't about that. But now I find it, gosh, that's just all I want to do is write horror and stuff. So
I mean,
I
for
don't know.
myself, I think I find a lot of catharsis in it.
Yes, absolutely.
That I write about, it's definitely working some stuff out. So I mean, you can write a letter to the police department about me if you like. That's cool. In fact, I would be quite flattered if you were to do that for me. I would appreciate.
I think that's going to be on my. I think that's going to be on my goal list. So.
Get reported to your employer as well, so that's always fun.
Yeah, great.
So, Mike, one of the things that I know about you is that you belong to the Colorado Independent Publishers Association. And I'm not actually a member of that association, but I am a lurker at that association. But I was just kind of hoping you could talk to us a little bit more about that and what that is and what that means for you.
Sure. So the Colorado Independent Publishers Association, which I'd like to abbreviate, call it CIPA, CIPA. It's a nonprofit cooperative of authors, independent book publishers like myself, and publishing professionals, again, like me and a lot of your viewers. Their mission is to encourage cooperative efforts and the free exchange of information, expertise, and experience to help members achieve and prosper, while also assisting the writing and marketing of their books through cooperative ventures, education, and networking. And I should add to that, they also do an awards program, which is quite the shindig.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a great organization. This morning I was on a Zoom meeting that they sponsored. It was 3 hours, and they were talking about. They did a whole presentation on, outlines versus pantser writing, and marketing strategies, and a whole bunch of things. It's a fascinating organization because it pulls from such a broad range of expertise. Every time I attend one of these meetings, or every time I go to a meeting, I learn so much. It's well worth the membership fee that you pay for it.
How much is the membership fee? Do you know?
I paid I think it was around $75, and that's an annual fee.
Yeah,
that's not bad at all.
That's
no.
Nothing. Yeah, that's
for what you get.
Well, because I've been watching your process, because you were, doing the filing and all that stuff. And I'm glad you're going to talk, hopefully next about your publishing. What is it? Is it Sisyphus?
Sisyphus, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Sure. I've been, you started out talking about it, and have been kind of showing the process a little bit on social media. And I'm wondering about it because, well, we need more, for instance, more female horror publishers
Absolutely.
out there.
Absolutely.
So maybe you could tell us about all of that as well. I'm sure there's a lot of viewers and podcast listeners who would like to know about the process and
Sure.
what you're doing with it.
Sure. So my first novel was published with my friend and co-author, Mark Clody. And he publishes all his stories under his own imprint called Sea Tales. And, I kind of, when I first got into writing seriously and while we were working on Frasier, I kind of quizzed him about this. And I said, why are you doing this? And he explained to me, he says, this has tax and liability. It kind of limits your exposure in those two areas. So I liked that immediately. Having that kind of having like an LLC umbrella kind of protects you from exposure to lawsuits. They can't attach your personal assets, for example, if somebody sues you for libel. So that's a good thing. I think what I like about having my own imprint is that I can, excuse me. I think what I like about having my own imprint is that I can have creative control over the entire process, start to finish. Everything from doing the writing to doing the initial layout to art directing the frontispieces to designing the cover, writing the blurbs. I mean, the whole business, signing the ISBN, the whole works. And I know that, if I do all that and if it's all on my desk, I know that it's going to be done and it's going to be done right. And I don't have to rely on any kind of third parties to, kind of muck things up, which I guess demonstrates what a control freak I am. But as you can tell from, the name I picked, Sisyphus, he's the guy who rolls the boulder up the mountain, right? In Greek mythology. And, he never quite gets the boulder up the mountain because it always rolls back on him, right? He's always crushed by the boulder and he gets up and he does the whole thing. This is his torment in the afterlife. So my logo for that is a guy and he's pushing this big old ball of paper, this big old ball of lined paper up a mountain. And it, being an independent publisher kind of feels like that sometimes. You feel like you have a dozen different irons in the fire, and you'll hear back from your printer, oh, your specs don't fit, or you might hear from a reader that I recently had a reader write to me and say, the font that you chose for your book is all it's all jumbled when I order a Kindle version. So there's a lot of little setbacks, and it kind of feels like you're pushing this thing up a hill the whole time. So that's why I established Sisyphus, is because I could house all those things. I have a background in graphic design, so that helps a lot. But I can house all those things internally, and I know that any mistakes that appear in any of my books, those are mine and mine alone. I don't have to blame, publishers or printers or editors or whatever. That's all me.
Did you do Corpse Honey under that,
yes.
Or have you? Okay. Do you have a copy of the cover's so awesome? I'm wondering if you have a copy that you can show.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, that really shows your wonderful.
So in this,
artwork.
I don't know if you can see this down here in the corner. That's the logo.
Yep. There it is.
So yeah.
And you design all of your own covers as well, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Like I said, I used to be a graphic designer, worked in the industry for about 20 years. And so, I have the Adobe Creative Suite that I use to produce, images like this was done using primarily Photoshop and some stock photography. But this type treatment here was done using a variety of different programs. So it's kind of a combined thing. And, what I was shooting for is, something kind of gooey
Yes,
that looked like corpse honey.
that looks gooey. You
But then,
accomplished it.
you shift gears, and all this was done in Illustrator. So Adobe Illustrator.
That one's really nice. I like that cover very much.
So, I like photo compositing, and I like adding different elements together. I think Corpse Honey had 10 different images that were all combined together. And I don't even remember how many scenes had. It had at least a dozen, if not 20.
Wow.
So, you go out, you find things, you kind of tweak them, and then you kind of combine them into a coherent whole. And I mean, like Corpse Honey, this particular cover is like the 8th revision that I did on this before I finally settled on this. And I had originally thought, well, I'll just use the frontispiece, which is done by an artist named Chad World. I was originally going to use that for the cover, and I got to playing around one day in Photoshop, and I thought, well, I could probably put something together that would be very eye-catching and wouldn't be so stark and black and white. So that's the red cover.
Now go ahead, Joy.
I was just going to ask if you do covers for. Can someone hire you to create their cover, or you just do it for yourself, or your?
No, I've worked on. I did most of my friend Mark's covers for his zombie books. He has calls them the Zombie Chronicles, and so I did an illustrated piece for him, which is it's a hand, right? And in his work, he talks about how zombies kind of see the world, and the more people that they eat, the more aware they are of their surroundings, and the more they gain kind of regain consciousness. So I wanted to capture that particular concept in the cover. So I did the main illustration for that and the book cover for that, and probably for, I don't know, 4 or 5 of his other works, Billions, Caio Elena. There are several, but it's been years and years.
What I was going to say is, so you redesigned your website recently. See, I follow you so much. So, did you put a tab on there to feature some of your artwork and stuff too, that our listeners and viewers would be able to go check out?
I did. It's in the gallery portion of it. I think it's called Fine Art.
Okay.
So
cool.
and you can see both the illustrations that I did for Outbreak, and I think I put both of these book covers on there too.
Okay. Yeah, because I see it because you post stuff on Facebook and and stuff, and of course
I am a bit of a rasher. I rash the heck out of Facebook, so yeah.
Yeah, so well, like that one picture you did, and I was like, oh, can you do that? Was it like it's your cover photo for your website, I think, but you have like the yeah. Yeah. I was like, that is so cool. You're just like all around super talented with all of that stuff.
That's kind of good to say. Thanks.
That's very cool. So should we ask what you're currently working on?
Oh, hang on. We're going to edit that little part out. We want to ask him about the interiors that he designs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Put a hand up.
So I do the interior designs too, and you'll notice I didn't do this so much with Corpse Honey, but I did it a lot with scenes. Is like the chapter headers and stuff. They're all different, and they all kind of reflect. They all kind of reflect what's going on in the story. So you'll be flipping through here, and it's funny. A lot of people don't notice it at first. I kind of have to point that out to them. And then they're like, oh, yeah, that actually, kind of reflects the story. And you know, it's fun to do stuff like this, where you have, you know, blood splatters and flies and, you know,
Yeah.
little weird things that you can put in a story. That's one of the benefits of you know, managing your own imprint, is that you have complete creative control.
That's very cool. I like that. Are you also for hire for interior design as well?
Yes.
Yes, nice. Oh,
Yep.
okay. Okay, we can edit that little brief
Okay, yeah.
out as well.
I'm waiting.
I guess we wanted to go on to Brenda. Why don't you ask him about what he's currently working on?
Okay. So I know you have a lot of stuff in the works. So could you tell us what you're currently working on? One of the things I'm tickled to see that we'll both be a part of coming up. So yeah, so can you tell us what's going on coming up?
Sure. Just this last week, I signed a contract for the Jewish Book of Horrors, which is, you know, put out by Josh Schlossberg from the Denver Horror Collective. And he's going to publish my story, The Horse Leech Has Two Maws, in there. And I'm so thrilled about it. I just can't hardly stand it. He's kind of made me not discuss it, you know, online until everybody's been informed, but he gave me permission to give you guys the scoop. So there's the scoop.
Nice. There's the scoop. I read part of that in a critique group, and I have to tell you that every once in a while, when I'm having a quiet moment, some of those weird scenes and feelings I got from reading that will sneak into my thoughts.
Oh, good.
I just want you to know that that story's still tickling in my brain.
That's one of the things that laid their eggs in there. See?
Yeah, I'm gonna turn into a corpse honey thing here pretty quick. I think about it quite often, actually. So well done. So well done. I'm so excited to see that. That is one anthology that I am really looking forward to.
Me too. You know, it's going to give me an exposure to a whole nother group of readers. And, you know, I've downloaded like Terror at 5280 and the other anthologies that the collective has put out. And I've been blown away. What was the Wendigo anthology? What was that called? Tales of the Wendigo?
Wendigo's Consumed, stories inspired by the Wendigo. Yeah.
Amazing stories. Amazing stories. Joy, your story was wonderful. And
thank you.
You know, it was something that I would have never associated with a Wendigo. I love Hoarders, right? I love that show.
Yeah.
And I can't get enough of it. And it skeeves me out every time I watch it. I always have to clean the house for like 2 hours after I watch a single episode. But, you know, your story, I love the fact that you kind of tapped into that, you know, that insatiable mindset, that kind of mindset that, you know, you're going to just take and take and take and take and never be satisfied. I love that.
Right. Yeah. Before they decided to do this anthology, Josh approached me and asked how I felt about cultural appropriation for it, with my Native American background. And I knew the Snyders and how they would deal with it, because Henry's also First Nations. So
is he?
Yeah, he is.
Huh.
So I knew that it would be handled properly and it wouldn't be exploitative and it wouldn't be weird. And I think they did a fabulous job with that. And so I'm really, really looking forward to the Jewish Book of Horror.
And you know, I struggled with that too. In fact, you know, I talked about that that very issue with several friends of mine. You know, I'm not Jewish. I don't have a lot of exposure to that religious practice, you know, in my life. Like I said, I'm an atheist. So so I was a little concerned that I might be stepping on some toes. So I did a copious amount of research, and I hope that, you know, readers don't field that I've appropriated, a horrible event. My story takes place during the Holocaust, and at a concentration camp called Theresienstadt, which is in Czechoslovakia. And it was a difficult piece to write for that aspect alone. But then to try to get into the heads of the people who were interned there, and the horrors that they saw day in, day out, and then to extrapolate more and add a monster on top of that, it was a very challenging story to write.
Well, I think you handled it very well.
Thank
and
you.
did a very nice job with it. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
that story is still tickling in the back of my brain.
Good.
Yeah, for me
love
too. For me too, because it was so well researched and written, and you had you had several people who were of Jewish descent who were also reading and critiquing on it. So therefore, I think you had this sensitivity read on it and everything, and it's a really good story. I mean, it does stick with you forever. It really does.
That means a lot to me. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
It was probably one of the quickest pieces I ever wrote, because I'm new to the Denver horror collective community, and it seems like I joined, I heard about the call, and then I did the critique, and then I submitted, all in the space of about 8 weeks.
Wow.
And I mean, yeah,
That's great.
my stories just linger. They just, some of them are just, I just can't get rid of them. And this one just flowed out of me.
Well, it's awesome.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm excited that it got accepted to that.
Yeah, me too. I was thrilled.
That's great.
So I'm working on that. I'm working on a longer form piece called The Lost City of Brass, which is the sequel to Frasier, the book that I mentioned that I wrote with my friend Mark. That's been 7 years in the making. So we're about 75 pages into that. And thankfully he's moving back to Colorado this summer. So we'll get some FaceTime and, drink some beers and do some writing this summer, and hopefully have that done. I wrapped up a story called The Man Cold, which takes place in the near future, where almost all the men in the world are killed by a new virus. And, it's
I love that thought.
It's kind of tongue in cheek. This guy is my protagonist is relegated to being a quote breeder, because he's one of the few men that are still left. So he estimates there are 3 to 5 million women of childbearing age per man in his situation. The guys that manage to get past the sickness and still be able to reproduce kids. So it kind of goes into that, and about, it's tongue in cheek about him going into the clinic and getting studied and all this other stuff. It's been a fun little tale to write, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with it.
That's a good, that'll be interesting to see. I want to critique that one. So share that.
Okay.
That one will be popular, I have a feeling. Yeah,
So
I haven't written anything around the pandemic yet. Several things, popping in and out, but it's sort of like, for myself, it's just too fresh right now. I need to kind of get some space between the actual happenings and my writing. So I don't know. I don't think everybody else feels the same way, but that's how I'm kind of approaching it.
That's, I found that to be true too. And, no editor out there right now wants to touch a pandemic story. Nobody even wants to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So that's, I kind of started writing this about mid-year last year, and thought, oh, well, I'll kind of write about this pandemic, because you never know how long it's going to last. Right. And, I didn't have that kind of COVID fatigue, yet. And I think that that's a lot of readers have that. A lot of people have that. They don't want any more to do with germs.
True. That is true. I know I'm kind of at that point myself right now.
Right.
I'm just praying we get to the end of the school year without anybody else going into quarantine, because my kids will flip out if they get quarantined again. So just got my fingers crossed. So Michael, we were kind of hoping that maybe you'd be willing to share something with us of what you're working on or what you have published. We'd love to hear something.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I wanted to read a little bit from Corpse Honey, if that's okay. 2 pieces, maybe?
Yes.
If we have time? Okay. So the first one I'd like to read from is the first story in Corpse Honey. It's called In Unison with a Dying Earth. And this story is, my protagonist in this story is a vampire who, you know, she's lovesick. She got bit by this handsome, roguish vampire, and then he immediately up and left her. And so she has been pining for him all these years, and then suddenly the world ends. And she's kind of left to kind of deal with the ramifications of that. So that's the story setup for that. Enthralled, she bent her lips to his bloodied wrist. His blood tasted like fire, incinerating her consciousness, setting her body alight and burning away her mortal existence. The fire consumed her as she consumed it, a mindless ecstasy which overwhelmed all thought and volition. Madness wound and burrowed its way through the ashes of self that remained, feeding there, growing there, insanely copulating with itself, flourishing in the vast inky darkness. Did she imagine it then, falling into the bottomless well of time, falling down, down, endlessly through the centuries, falling down, down, into a future so utterly vast that it defied comprehension? Where there had once been firmament of reason, a fixed point in time and space, there now remained only an endless darkness that drained the life from her, stole her dreams away and soul away, dissolving her awareness, leaving no trace.
Oh man, I love that line. His blood tasted like fire. That's awesome. And that's from, I'm sorry, what was the title of that story?
It's In Unison with the Dying Earth, and it's the first story in Corpse Honey.
Cool, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's actually the oldest story that I have published. I wrote a good portion of this story under 2 or 3 different titles way back in college. So this little taste there has been, you know, kind of lingering in my in my slush folder for quite some time.
Sure.
I'd like to do one too from Corpse Honey. It's called Mortimer the Mouse. The premise behind this is a little kid gets kind of lost at a carnival or at an amusement park. And you know how amusement parks usually have, you know, all the animatronic characters and the guys walking around in suits. This is a story about that. Of course, I, like every other child in the park, had seen the commercials and animated specials featuring Mortimer, the short-tailed mouse, and his retinue of curious friends, Oswald the hare, Horace the donkey, and so on. The other costume characters that I had seen in the park were strangely reticent to speak, despite the fact that their TV personas never seemed to shut up. And so I found it quite odd that this particular Mortimer groaned as he bent forward, as though to examine me more closely. Even through the thick rubberized costume, I could smell the performer's sweat beneath. Well, sweat and something else, something unpleasant, something unlike body odor at all. No, this smelled different. There was a sickly sweetness to it. It was the sharp scent of corruption just before it ripened into reeking and rampant decay. The stench seemed to ooze through layers of foam, seeping through the heavy felt costuming. The creature extended its hand out to me, a thickly padded, 3-fingered glove bound at the wrist by a wide elastic strap. The glove, normally a dazzling white, was stained and mottled as though something had leached through all the foam stuffing and had seeped to the surface. I hesitated, and the thing tilted its head, an unmistakable gesture of curiosity and bewilderment. Some of the other amusement park customers cajoled me to shake his hand, their phones at the ready to capture what promised to be an adorbs moment. I gazed into the thing's mesh-filled eyes for some clue of its intent, but with the sun behind it, its eyes appeared to be dark, empty pits bored into the thing's ridiculously bulbous skull. The darkness there was deep and impenetrable. Again, I heard that dreadful wheezing emanating from inside its mask. Up close, the thing's mesh eyelids gave vent to an awful miasma as the damp fetor inside the suit bellowed out. Before I fully realized what was happening, the thing reached down and forcibly shook my hand, shaking it vigorously. The patrons who had gathered around me chuckled at the gesture. Utterly stunned, I found Mortimer's handshake jarring and none too gentle, but I was determined not to broadcast my unease. After all, how many kids could say that they met Mortimer the Mouse, much less shook his hand? Still holding my hand, the caricature straightened, swaying slightly as though the man inside was drunk. Its soft padded gloves seemed to squish under my grip as I tentatively tried to pull away. Again, the figure glanced down at me, tilting its head comically in bewilderment, but I suspect that I was the only one who heard its exasperated huff. A new, more urgent type of alarm pricked at my awareness, displacing my excitement. Despite weeks of anticipation of visiting the park, I suddenly wanted to be home, far away from the noise and the rides and the people, and especially far away from Mortimer the Mouse. Involuntarily, I pulled away, but the thing's grip held me fast. Underneath the thick padded gloves, I felt something that couldn't possibly be fingers writhe and squirm and tighten.
Ooh, creepy. I like it.
I've always seen, Chuck E. Cheese and those places, with the big rats as more frightening things than appealing things to kids. I never understood why, a rat would peddle pizzas, but
One of my twins was terrified of Chuck E. Cheese. And so my husband arranged for them to meet with the Chuck E. Cheese character behind the scenes so that they could take the mask off and show that it was just a person. And my one twin was kind of like, there's something fishy about this man. And she still never trusted him. And the cow from Chick-fil-A, that cow. And we're driving through Denver one time, not even our neighborhood, and the cow is out front with the sign, and she's like, oh my God, there's that cow. How the heck did he get here? He's following. To this day, she hates those characters. So yeah, I don't know why we do this to kids, but we do.
I don't either. The whole carnival scene, you read Something Wicked This Way Comes, and that's kind of the vibe that I was going for with this. It's just such a weird place. It's such a weird, there's kind of that forced frivolity on you, and it's glaring and it's loud and it's everything's sticky and dirty and just you smell the exhaust from the rides. It's just awful.
And the dead eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, the carnies that have like 3 teeth and no soul behind their eyes.
Missing fingers.
Yeah.
To shoot this pop gun, little girl.
Right.
But we still go. Maybe because
copious amounts of money.
Yes, maybe like an Alamosa might be like, we have, I don't even know what we call it, but they have a carnival of some sort and stuff. And I think it's just because there's nothing else going on. So, that be there or be square. But yeah, like the stimulation of this glitzy, shiny world that's, shiny on the front, but a skeleton on the back. It's so creepy. It's so creepy.
I know that some of your viewers were probably familiar with Lakeside there in Denver. And, when I used to go back in the late 70s, early 80s, I was, we'd go to Lakeside one year and then we'd go to Elitch's the next year. And that's kind of how it went, for my childhood. And I was always amazed at the difference between the two parks. You know, the flying chipmunk, which just, you know, basically grounds you out of your skin. And, you know, you can almost see the bolts and the rivets popping out of that thing. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot of lakeside in this story. In fact, I think I even call it Lakeview Amusement Park. I borrowed a name from an amusement park, closed one out in Kentucky, I think. So
I could definitely see that. The last time my family and I went to Lakeside was probably, oh my gosh, maybe 5 years ago.
mhm,
And we were riding the little train around the lake at night, and the
mhm.
train skipped the track.
Get out.
And I had all these little kids, and it's pitch black, and you know the grass is like over the top of the train. And I told my husband, if I have to get out of this train and walk with these children, somebody is going to die. So somehow they fixed it. But yeah, definitely I got a lakeside vibe from that. I love that.
Yeah, lakeside it's something that everybody should experience, but
Absolutely.
probably not more than once, because you're really putting your life in somebody else's hands.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I sure appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk with you guys. You know, you guys are fun to chat with besides, but you know, talking about writing stuff, I love to do that. So thank you.
This has been awesome.
Mike,
Awesome.
thank you for coming on and being our guest. We appreciate it so much and spending part of your day with us.
Absolutely.
We look
My
very
pleasure.
forward to seeing your story in the Jewish Book of Horror.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Do you have a release date for that at all? Do you know? Yeah.
Hanukkah this year.
Excellent. I'm waiting with bated breath for that one to be
It's
revealed.
gonna be great. If it shows the caliber of writers that we've had in other anthologies that Josh has put together, I have no doubt that it's going to be very well received.
I think so as well. Well, folks, thank you so much for listening to The Burial Plot with your host, Brenda Tolian, and myself, Joy Yaley. You can find Brenda at brendatolian.com, and you can find me at joyyaley.com. And Michael, what is your web address that we can find out more about you?
It's Michael Picco, MICHAEL, P as in Paul, ICCO.com.
And we will put all of those links in the show notes so that everybody can find that information. And again, just thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us.
Loved
and
it.
everybody, until next time, stay above ground.